Hello again. As I have mentioned before, there are fashions in violence and murder, just as there are in architecture, music and the arts. In Britain, before the First World War, more than half of all murders were carried out by means of cutthroat razors and pokers. Today, crimes of that kind are almost unheard of. Just as with music, trends from other countries influence the frequency and style of violent attacks and murderous assault. Popular music in this country, for example, is heavily influenced by America, and fashions in clothing also cross the Atlantic from America to Britain. Grievous bodily harm and murder are also subject to similar trends from other countries, although in this case the effect of American culture is not quite as noticeable. American murders run heavily in the direction of firearms, which are not readily available in this country. We must look to other nations if we wish to see how fashions in murder and attempted murder in this country have been affected in recent years. To give one example from the other day, until a decade or so ago, the idea of somebody ambushing a soldier in uniform outside an army base in this country and then hacking at him with knives had never been seen. It was a non-existent crime. No one had never done such a thing. In May 2013, though, a murder of this kind was committed by two Nigerians. This was the Lee Rigby case. The day before yesterday, an identical crime was attempted when a uniformed soldier was ambushed outside an army base and an attempt made on his life by stabbing him repeatedly. By uncanny coincidence, the man charged in connection with this case also happens to be Nigerian. Of course, the case is sub judice, and I'm not suggesting that the man charged with this offence is guilty. I will say, though, that it's an interesting coincidence that two such bizarre crimes should apparently both have a connection with the same West African country. Of course, it may be argued coincidences do happen. Perhaps looking at a quiet English town and then examining a few of the murders committed there might tell us whether or not we can discern any changing fads or fashions or patterns in murder which might have been transmitted in some way from other parts of the world. The Lincolnshire town of Boston was, until a few years ago, famous only for a very prominent church, the so-called Boston Stump. It was a peaceful place with a murder rate running at practically zero. I remember Boston in the 1990s. My wife is from Grimsby. We used to visit Boston sometimes on the way to or from Grimsby from London. A few years ago, the number of murders in that town shot up until it exceeded the murder rate of London and Manchester, causing Boston to be dubbed the murder capital of England. Some of those murders are so odd that they definitely suggest that fashions in deliberate killing of people are changing in that part of Britain, probably as a result of foreign influence. If you try Googling Boston links and murder together, you will soon see what I mean. The first few hits are just about a couple of foreigners on trial relating to the death of a pub landlord, but that's a fairly mundane sort of crime involving a baseball bat in the pub car park. Keep scrolling down though, and you will come to the murder of a 12-year-old boy by a Polish teenager called Maciej Grześ, who in 2021 was sent to prison for life for stabbing a schoolboy repeatedly and then trying to cut off his head. That is definitely an odd crime of a kind rarely seen in this country. Keep going and you will come across the stabbing to death in the street in 2022 of a 9-year-old girl by a Lithuanian called Davidas Skabas. That too is a very odd crime. It was committed in the open air for no apparent reason by somebody not related to the victim, no motive that can ever be discerned. Also in 2022, we find a man called Kamil Ranajek being convicted of killing a woman and then cutting her body up into no fewer than 15 pieces and disposing of them. This too is a very unusual crime. Dismembering bodies after a murder does happen sometimes, but rarely as extensively as in this case. Usually it's limited just to, say, sawing the legs off or decapitating the body. It is the only case I can think of in English history where the body was divided up into 15 parts, with the possible exception, of course, of Dennis Nilsson in Muswell Hill. It's my belief that the presence of a large number of people from Eastern Europe has had the effect of altering the type and perhaps frequency of murders in this particular area. It would, I suppose, be surprising really if it did not. Any large community will certainly have its own traditions, whether these might be, say, worshipping in an Eastern Orthodox church rather than an Anglican one, or committing murder out of doors rather than in the home like most British people. I'll be making a further video on this subject as there is a good deal more to be said about it. In the description to this video I give a few links on the cases about which I've been talking.